The room went dead quiet when Roger Thompson called out his name. Christopher Thompson, 23 years old, 3 months on the job, couldn't tell you what a freight manifest was if his life depended on it. And there I was, Andrew Williams, 48 years old, having to clap while they handed my future to a kid who thought logistics meant moving boxes around. After 8 years of keeping Coastal Transport Solutions from falling apart, 8 years of weekend calls and putting out fires, they expected me to smile and congratulate the boss's son. I did what I had to do. I clapped. But something inside me broke that day, and Roger had no idea what he'd just started. Let me back up here. When I joined Coastal Transport 8 years ago, I was just grateful for steady work. The divorce was still fresh, Jennifer was only 8, and I needed a job with decent benefits and regular hours. Well, regular hours was the plan anyway. Freight logistics isn't exactly glamorous, but I figured it was solid work. Turns out I had a knack for it. Really good at it, actually. Within 6 months, I was the guy people called when shipments got stuck at the port of Seattle. When clients started screaming about customs delays, they came to me. When that warehouse fire in Spokane shut down our northern routes for a week, I had backup distribution lines running in 4 hours flat. I became the go-to guy when everything went wrong. And in the freight business, something's always going wrong. My coworkers noticed. The clients definitely noticed. Roger Thompson, our regional director, he noticed too, but only when it made him look good upstairs. Every performance review came back stellar. Every year ended with the same speech. Andrew, just keep doing what you're doing. Your time's coming. And I bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. What else was I supposed to do? Jennifer needed stability. College wasn't getting any cheaper. The child support payments weren't negotiable. Roger knew all this stuff. He knew I couldn't afford to make waves. So I became the backbone of that place. I knew every carrier from Portland to Denver by their first names, could spot supply chain problems 2 weeks out. When Roger walked into corporate meetings with brilliant solutions, half the time they were mine. He loved taking credit for my work. As long as I stayed quiet and kept fixing things, I was exactly the kind of employee guys like him depend on. Reliable, competent, invisible. The perfect company man who'd never rock the boat. I kept thinking hard work counted for something, that loyalty meant something, that if you just put your head down and did good work, eventually the system would be fair to you. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs, but at the time I just kept pushing through. Then Christopher showed up and everything changed. Roger introduced him like he was announcing royalty instead of some recent business graduate who'd never been within 50 feet of a loading dock. Christopher's here to learn our operations from the ground up, Roger announced, grinning like his kid's presence alone made the whole company better. The thing about nepotism is, everybody knows what's happening, but nobody's allowed to say it out loud. We all just had to pretend this was normal. Christopher got assigned to shadow me, and within about an hour it became crystal clear he had no clue what we actually did. His first question was how many packages we processed every day. Packages, like we were some UPS store. I explained we coordinate container freight across ports and inland distribution hubs, 40-foot containers with thousands of tons of cargo. He nodded seriously and asked how many delivery trucks we had. We didn't have delivery trucks. We contract carriers who move the stuff from point A to point B. Another serious nod, another note in his little notebook. Don't get me wrong, the kid wasn't stupid. He wasn't mean about it either. His whole attitude was just this quiet assumption that he belonged there, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That was almost worse than if he'd been a complete jerk. He took notes like his life depended on it, filling up pages with bullet points I'm pretty sure he never looked at again. Sat in on my client calls, scribbling frantically every time someone mentioned anything technical. Always looked up afterward with this eager expression, like he expected praise just for paying attention. I tried to teach him. I really did. Explain supply chain bottlenecks, port delays, vessel scheduling, the carrier relationships that kept our whole operation running. He'd listen and nod, but nothing stuck. Roger still talked about him like he was the next great logistics genius. Christopher's bringing fresh perspectives to our operations, Roger would say in meetings. Fresh perspectives. The kid couldn't find Portland on a map without GPS. But here's the thing that really got to me. Christopher started showing up in meetings he had no business being in. Decisions I normally got asked about went straight through him first. People who used to come to me for answers now asked, "Has Christopher looked at this yet?" like approval from someone who thought a bill of lading was some kind of invoice suddenly mattered more than 8 years of experience. I could feel the ground shifting under my feet, but I told myself it was temporary. Roger was just trying to give his son some exposure, some learning opportunities. Once Christopher got his feet wet, things would go back to normal. Man, was I wrong about that. The whole office dynamic started changing. Christopher would walk into a room and conversations got careful, guarded. Not because people were afraid of him exactly, but because they knew who his father was. They knew one wrong word could get back to Roger. When I walked into meetings, people straightened up because they knew problems were about to get solved. When Christopher walked in, people just got nervous. But Roger kept pushing him forward, putting him in situations he wasn't ready for, taking credit when I had to clean up the messes afterward. The writing was on the wall, but I didn't want to see it. I should have seen what was coming next. The morning it happened, something felt off in the office. You know that feeling when everyone knows something you don't? People were giving me these weird looks, small smiles, encouraging nods. A couple guys patted my shoulder on the way to the coffee machine. I walked into the conference room thinking we were just doing another quarterly update. Roger loved these meetings where he'd drone on about efficiency metrics that I'd helped put together. Usually lasted an hour, everybody pretended to pay attention, then we'd get back to actual work. But today felt different. People kept glancing at me with these expectant looks. For one stupid moment, I actually thought maybe this was it. Maybe after 8 years of putting out fires and making Roger look good, he was finally going to recognize what I brought to the table. Then Roger walked in with Christopher right behind him. The kid's face was red with excitement, clutching a folder like it contained his Oscar speech. That's when I knew something was up. Roger did his whole throat-clearing thing he does when he wants everyone's attention. Before we get to the quarterly numbers, he said, "I've got some important news to share." Every eye in that room bounced between him and me. I could feel my heart speed up a little. Roger put his hand on Christopher's shoulder, beaming like a proud father at a graduation. Effective immediately, he announced, Christopher Thompson will be taking over as Operations Director for our Pacific Northwest Division. I swear it took about 5 seconds for those words to actually reach my brain. Operations Director. The job I'd been working toward for years. The job I was already doing, just without the title or the pay. Christopher blinked a bunch of times, like he couldn't believe it either. Then the applause started. Slow at first, then building into this awkward, forced clapping that nobody really meant. I just sat there like someone had super-glued me to the chair. 8 years. 8 years of weekend crisis calls, of fixing Roger's mistakes, of making this division run like clockwork, and they were handing it all to a kid who'd been there 3 months. I made myself clap. Had to. What else was I going to do? My hands felt like they belonged to someone else. Christopher was shaking hands with people, accepting congratulations for a job he'd never actually done. Taking credit for work he couldn't even understand. And Roger was eating it up, acting like he'd made some brilliant executive decision. I want to give special thanks to someone who's been instrumental in getting Christopher ready for this role, Roger said, turning toward me. Here it comes, I thought. Maybe he'll throw me a bone. Maybe he'll acknowledge what I've done, even if he's not promoting me. Andrew has been invaluable in bringing Christopher up to speed on our operations, up to speed. Like everything I knew, every crisis I'd handled, every relationship I'd built was just some training program for the boss's son. I nodded like a good soldier, smiled like it didn't kill me inside. The room was buzzing with people congratulating Christopher, but nobody could quite look me in the eye for more than a second. When the meeting finally broke up, I grabbed my notebook and started heading for the door. I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what the hell just happened to my career. Andrew, hang on a minute, Roger called out. Great. Here comes the pat on the head. The room cleared out until it was just me and him. Roger loosened his tie like he was the one who'd been through something exhausting. I know this might come as a surprise, he started. A surprise. Right. Like I hadn't seen this coming from the day Christopher walked through the door, but Christopher brings a fresh perspective to the role. New ideas, you know? Fresh perspective. The kid who thought we delivered packages was going to revolutionize freight logistics. I didn't say anything, just waited to see what other garbage he was going to feed me. You understand, right? It's nothing personal. Nothing personal. Sure, Roger. Passing me over for your unqualified son after 8 years of loyal service. Nothing personal about that at all. I understand perfectly, I said. And you know what? I really did. I finally understood exactly how much my loyalty was worth to this company. Roger relaxed a little, probably thinking I was going to be a good sport about the whole thing, that I'd just quietly accept getting screwed over and keep doing my job with a smile. He had no idea what was coming. That night I stayed late, partly because I didn't want to go home and explain to Jennifer why her old man looked like he'd been hit by a truck, and partly because the office was the only place I could think straight. I finished up some reports that probably nobody would ever read, updated vendor files that Roger had been asking about for months, tried to convince myself that maybe I could live with this, maybe I could swallow my pride and just keep my head down. Who was I kidding? I was 48 years old. I had skills, experience, relationships in this industry. I didn't have to take this. Around 8 p.m., the building was pretty much empty except for the cleaning crew. I got up to stretch my legs and maybe grab some coffee from the break room, even though it would probably keep me up all night. Walking past Roger's office, I heard voices inside. Low, serious conversation. His door was cracked open just enough that sound was leaking out into the hallway. I should have kept walking. Should have minded my own business. But something told me this conversation was about me, and I couldn't resist listening in. What I heard next changed everything. "The board's going to have questions about this," a voice said from inside Roger's office. I recognized it right away. Brian Foster, our corporate liaison, guy who came down from Seattle every quarter to check on things. "They'll get over it," Roger replied. "Christopher's got the degree and he's family. That's what matters." I stopped walking. Stood there in the hallway like an idiot, but I couldn't help myself. "What about Andrew?" Brian asked. "The guy's been running this division for years. Didn't you tell corporate he was your strongest candidate for the next promotion?" There was a pause. Then Roger laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Andrew's solid, but he's not leadership material." Leadership material. Right. I'd only been leading this place for the better part of a decade. "Come on, Roger. His track record speaks for itself," Brian pushed. "The Morrison freight contract, the Portland crisis last year, the Spokane warehouse fire. Andrew handled all of that." "Sure, he's good at putting out fires," Roger said. "But Andrew's not going anywhere. Single dad, mortgage payments, child support. He needs this job more than we need him to be happy about it." My blood went cold. This wasn't about my performance. This was about my life. My divorce, my kid, my bills. Roger thought he had me trapped. "He'll keep his head down," Roger continued, sounding way too confident about it. "He always does. Andrew's the type who'll grumble quietly but won't make waves. Too much to lose." Brian didn't sound convinced. "I don't know, man. Guys like Andrew, you push them too far and they walk. Then what happens to your operations? Where's he gonna go?" Roger laughed again. "He's 48 years old in a specialized industry. I could make a few phone calls, make sure nobody else in the region hires him. Andrew knows that. He's not stupid." That's when it hit me. Roger didn't just think I was stuck. He thought he owned me, like I was some piece of equipment he could use however he wanted because I had responsibilities. "Well, guess what, Roger? You just made the biggest mistake of your career." I backed away from that door as quietly as I could, went back to my desk and shut down my computer. Didn't say a word to anyone. Just grabbed my keys and headed for the parking lot. The drive home was interesting. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about what came next. I was actually excited about it. Friday morning, I came in early and wrote my resignation letter. Used the good paper from the supply closet, the kind you use for important documents. Took my time with it, made sure every word was exactly right. At 4:30, I walked into Roger's office. He was wrapping up another one of his strategy sessions with Christopher, probably telling the kid how to revolutionize the freight industry or something. "Andrew," Roger said, putting on that fake smile he used when he wanted to seem approachable. "How's everything going? Christopher settling in okay?" I handed him the envelope. "This is my 2 weeks' notice." The smile died so fast it was almost funny. His eyebrows shot up, then crashed together. For the first time since I'd known him, Roger Thompson looked genuinely scared. "This is a joke, right?" He tore open the envelope, read it twice. Fast the first time, slower the second. "Nope," I said. "Andrew, you can't be serious. You're leaving because of the promotion?" I didn't answer. Sometimes silence says more than words. "Look, let's talk about this," he said, standing up. "Don't do anything rash here. Nothing rash about it. I've been thinking about this for a while." Roger started pacing behind his desk. "You realize how this looks, right? Walking out because you didn't get the job? That's not very professional. Professional. This from the guy who just promoted his totally unqualified son. You're throwing away 8 years, he continued. Everything you've built here. If that's how you see it, I said. He tried a different approach, leaning forward like we were old buddies. Andrew, you're good at what you do, but you don't want to burn bridges. I might not be able to give you a strong reference if you walk out like this. There it was. The threat I knew was coming. 8 years of perfect reviews, and now he was going to trash my reputation because I wouldn't play along with his little family business. Won't need a reference, I said. His face got red. You're being emotional about this. Take the weekend. Come back Monday and we'll forget this whole conversation happened. No thanks. I'll finish my 2 weeks, document everything Christopher needs to know, and then I'm done. He laughed, but it came out bitter. You think Christopher needs your documentation? He's going to be fine. Right. The kid who thought we delivered packages was going to run a complex logistics operation just fine. Monday morning proved exactly how wrong Roger was about that. I got to the office around 7 a.m. and found Christopher already at his desk. Kid looked like he hadn't slept in days. Papers everywhere, 3 different computer screens open, stress written all over his face. Andrew, thank God, he said when he saw me. I've been here since 5. We've got a major problem with the Portland shipment. Customs flagged our manifest and Morrison Freight is saying they'll cancel the whole contract if we don't fix it today. Morrison Freight, our biggest account on the coast. The same client who'd told me more than once, Andrew, if you ever leave this company, we're following you out the door. What did you tell them? I asked. I said I'd look into it and get back to them, Christopher said, his voice shaking a little. But I don't know where to start. The customs forms don't match the shipping documents, and I can't figure out which carrier is supposed to handle the Portland to Boise leg. I looked at the mess on his desk. Wrong carrier contracts, outdated shipping forms, a manifest that had been filled out incorrectly in 3 different places. The kid had been staring at this stuff for 2 hours and had no idea what he was looking at. Part of me wanted to let him figure it out himself, let Roger deal with the consequences of his brilliant promotion decision. But Morrison Freight didn't deserve to get caught in the middle of this family drama. I spent the next 3 hours walking Christopher through the fix, showed him which forms went with which carriers, how to read the customs codes, why the Portland-Boise route had to go through specific distribution hubs. He took notes furiously, asked decent questions, but I could tell he was overwhelmed. By noon we had it sorted out, but the damage was already done. Morrison's logistics manager called me directly that afternoon. Andrew, what the hell is going on over there? We've been working with you for 5 years. Now some kid calls us who doesn't know a shipping container from a lunchbox? That conversation lasted about 20 minutes. By the end of it, Morrison was asking pointed questions about my plans. When I told them I was leaving in less than 2 weeks, the line went quiet. Well, the manager finally said, wherever you land, give us a call. We'd rather do business with you than with Coastal Transport. 3 more clients called that week with similar concerns. Word travels fast in this industry, and my reputation had been built over 8 years of getting things done right. Roger called me into his office Friday afternoon. This time Christopher was there too, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 1 week. I hear you've been taking job interviews, Roger said. I'm exploring opportunities. While you're still employed here, while you're supposed to be training Christopher, I haven't shared any confidential information. Roger slammed his hand on the desk. Your client relationships are confidential information. No, I said, letting some heat into my voice for the first time. My relationships with clients are built on trust. Trust follows the person who earned it, not the company letterhead. Roger's face went from red to purple. If you try to take our clients with you, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I stood up slowly. You don't have that kind of power, Roger. But thanks for reminding me why I'm leaving. Christopher just sat there looking miserable. The kid knew he was in way over his head, and he knew his father had made a mess that was about to get a whole lot worse. My last week was going to be very interesting. My last week at Coastal Transport was like watching a slow-motion car crash. I documented everything Christopher would need to know, not because I cared about Roger anymore, but because the other employees and clients didn't deserve to get caught in the mess. Christopher shadowed me like a lost puppy, taking notes on everything from vendor payment schedules to emergency contact lists. The kid was trying, I'll give him that, but you can't learn 8 years of experience in 5 days. Wednesday morning, my phone rang. Kevin Patterson, regional director at Northwest Freight Group. I knew the name. They were our biggest competitor on the coast. Andrew, I hear there might be some changes happening at Coastal Transport, Kevin said. Any chance you'd be interested in talking? We met that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. Kevin didn't waste time with small talk. We've been watching your work for years, he said. The way you handled the Morrison situation last year, the Spokane crisis, the Port of Seattle delays, we know who's really been running that operation. He slid a folder across the table. We're expanding our Pacific Northwest division. We need someone who knows the territory, knows the clients, knows how to get things done. The offer was 35% more than what I was making at Coastal. Full benefits, profit sharing, and here's the kicker. They wanted me to hire my own team. We're not just buying your experience, Kevin said. We're buying your reputation. Nobody had ever said that to me before. I shook his hand right there. Friday was my last day. I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to the few people I actually cared about, and walked out of Coastal Transport for the final time. Roger was nowhere to be seen, probably hiding in his office. The following Monday, I started at Northwest Freight. Nice office, good equipment, and a team that actually wanted to learn from someone with experience instead of pretending they already knew everything. Within 2 weeks, 3 of my former clients had called Northwest asking about switching their contracts to work with me directly. It wasn't revenge, it was just business. These companies had trusted me for years, and they weren't about to stick with Coastal just because Roger thought loyalty was a one-way street. Morrison Freight was first. Their logistics manager called Kevin personally. "We want to follow Andrew," he said straight out. "Kid running things over at Coastal doesn't know what he's doing. We had 2 delayed shipments last week alone, then came Pacific Industrial, followed by Northwest Manufacturing. Each one brought their contracts worth hundreds of thousands in annual revenue." Kevin was impressed, but he wasn't surprised. "This is what happens when you hire people instead of just resumes," he told me. Meanwhile, things at Coastal Transport were going from bad to worse. I heard through the grapevine that Christopher was working 12-hour days trying to keep up. Poor kid was drowning, and Roger was too proud to admit he'd screwed up. The breaking point came about 6 weeks after I left. Pacific Industrial had a major shipment stuck at customs, the exact same kind of problem I used to fix in my sleep. Christopher couldn't figure out the customs codes, used the wrong carrier for the inland route, and the whole thing turned into a nightmare that lasted 3 days. Pacific Industrial pulled their contract the next morning. That was $400,000 in annual business walking out the door. 2 weeks later, the trade magazine ran a story that made my day. Coastal Transport Solutions, under investigation for nepotism and operational failures. Apparently the board had started asking hard questions about why their Pacific Northwest division was hemorrhaging clients and money. Roger got fired on a Thursday. Christopher resigned that same afternoon. According to the article, Coastal lost about 60% of their regional revenue in less than 3 months. The board brought in outside consultants to figure out what went wrong, and it didn't take them long to connect the dots. 6 months later, I ran into Christopher at a coffee shop in Seattle. He was hunched over textbooks, highlighter in hand, looking older and maybe a little wiser. "Andrew," he said when he saw me, looked genuinely relieved to see a familiar face. "Christopher. How are you doing?" He gestured at his books. "Back in school, supply chain management certification. Figured I should actually learn this stuff before I try to do it again." The kid had lost the entitled attitude. Now he just looked like someone who'd learned a hard lesson about the difference between having connections and having competence. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. I wasn't ready for that job. Dad kept telling me I'd grow into it, but I was in way over my head from day one. I bought his coffee before I left. No point in being angry at the kid anymore. He wasn't the real problem, just another casualty of Roger's ego and poor judgment." A year later, Northwest Freight's Pacific Northwest division had grown by 40%. Kevin promoted me to VP, gave me equity in the company, and asked me to help train the next generation of logistics managers. Actual training, not the sink or swim nepotism Roger had preferred. Jennifer started her sophomore year at University of Washington last month. The college fund that had kept me awake worrying for so many years? Not a problem anymore. She's studying business, and sometimes she asks me about supply chain management. I tell her the same thing I wish someone had told me years ago. Competence beats connections every time, but you have to be willing to walk away from places that don't value what you bring to the table. The whole experience taught me something I should have figured out a long time ago. Loyalty is supposed to go both ways. I spent 8 years being loyal to people who saw that loyalty as weakness, who thought my responsibilities made me powerless. Turns out those responsibilities didn't make me powerless. They made me focused on building something better for my daughter, for myself, and eventually for the people who actually appreciated what I could do. Roger thought he had me trapped. What he didn't realize was that good people with real skills always have options. It just took me 8 years to remember that. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting ahead.